Hi, this is Bob from Hobby Concepts, and today it's all about the driver. I am going to build and paint a bunch of driver figures and just show you how I do it. Now, I'm not the world's greatest figure painter, but people are always asking me, can you do a video on doing figures? I said, okay, I'll do it. So, I got 5 figures here that I put together. I'll show how to assemble them. I'll show how to eye paint them. You probably could paint them better. But what the heck, here's my techniques. I'm going to brush paint some, I'm going to airbrush some, I'm going to install one in the truck. Hopefully you'll find this helpful. Let's get started. Well, so here we have some driver figures. There's 5 of them. And today we're going to assemble and paint these, and I'm going to show you how I do it. I am not the most fantastic plastic modeler in the world. I love doing it, but hey, you know, the driver figure can be easy, it can be a little challenging, so we'll we'll take a look at this today. So the first thing I'm going to do is clip out all these parts, and when I'm clipping parts I always use a set of very high quality side cutters. The driver figure has some nibs that are left over when you clip them, no matter how good the cutter you use. And so you're going to want to kind of trim those off before you assemble it. Now, as an example, take the back side of the body here. And I'm going to do all 5 of these. I'm not going to obviously show assembling all 5 of them, but I want to show some different painting techniques. So I always test fit the parts, make sure that everything fits together good. I'm not too worried about removing the little sprue tabs and stuff until the very end. So this fits really good. I'm going to use my Tamiya plastic cement, and I just hold the pieces together and run the cement down the seam line. Alright, just give a little squeeze there. We'll do the other side. You mean you don't need to put cement on the halves before you put it together? No, you don't. This stuff is very thin. It just wicks right in and bonds the pieces super good. Boy, for gluing plastic things together, there's nothing better than this Tamiya cement. Okay, then we got to do across the shoulders up here. All right, there's our torso. We've got some other pieces here. As I said, maybe this is a little bit boring, but we're going to just glue the whole thing together piece by piece. Show you exactly how I do this. We got the head, and we got the legs. Driver figure comes with an instruction sheet. You really don't need it. The pieces only fit one way, and it's pretty straightforward. But there are a couple little gotchas we'll look at here. Okay, so we'll take a look at, say, one of these legs. This one. Again, I'm going to test fit the pieces. Now you can see, well, maybe you can see, there's a nib right here. Again, we're not too worried, and there's one right here. We're not too worried about that right now. First order of business is to get it glued together. Now, if the nibs are in the way, if the pieces don't fit right, then you've got to trim them off before you glue them. But in this case, they're sticking out the side. They don't bother anything. So we'll not worry about it. We'll set that aside. I'm going to set those aside because we'll do those off camera. The head, same thing. The fit is good. So we'll go ahead and glue it. Now this Tamiya cement dries virtually instantaneously. so you don't need tape or anything. And then the last part is one of the arms here. And the arm, yeah, this one fits good. Sometimes there's a piece in the way you have to trim off. Okay, well, I'm going to let those dry for a few minutes. I'm going to glue those other ones together. We'll come back and we'll talk about assembling them. So I zoomed in a little bit here so we can take a look at some of these pieces. Now this one, you can see the piece of sprue left over here on the bottom of the wrist. So I always just use an X-Acto when I have to clean these off. And you can use a fingernail file or a little piece of sandpaper. There's one here on the back. It's just important to get them off. The cool thing about the driver figure is when he's in a truck, no matter how good you look through the windshield, I'm just going to scrape that seam to get rid of it. So that one's good. The head, there's nothing except usually there's a bump here on the bottom where it glues onto the torso. Clean that off. On the torso, there's a couple sprue marks here on the bottom of the legs. Again, not super critical because when the driver's in the driver's seat, you're not looking at the bottom of the legs, but I still like to try to do a good job on it. And just to kind of hit this seam here a little bit with my knife. And I'll sand this a little bit too when I get the legs on. Okay, so we'll do the other arm. Same little bit here on the bottom of the wrist. Used to always forget that one. Alright, arm looks pretty good. Yep. Leg, there's two on each side. Really helps to have a nice sharp X-Acto knife when you do this. And the other leg. It's just the little things like this, like trimming those pieces off and kind of scraping the seams, that make your model a little better. Okay, now the legs simply glue in place, and they have a slot that fits into the leg joint here, so we're going to actually put a little cement right on this thing and stick the leg on. Again, with Tamiya cement, it really sticks quickly. This works by actually melting the plastic together. So it works best on parts that are not painted, because it needs to get that plastic kind of soft and goopy. Okay, I'm going to let that dry for a few minutes. So now it's time to do the arms. They have a ball here, and actually you can change the angle a little bit depending on how you want to do it. So I find that generally, and I usually build several of these driver figures ahead of time, generally I'll line up the body with the front of the arm here. So we'll just put a little bit of glue in here. There's a standoff for the arm. That's not enough glue to hold it, but I wanted to get some inside. Then I'll get the arm in the position I want and add some glue. Looks pretty good. There's a pretty good gap here on the back, but that doesn't matter. So the arms just glue on like that. Get that the way I want it. Okay, it's a little harder to build these when I'm filming it and trying to think about all the, getting the angles right on the camera. Okay, that looks pretty good. Get in here. And we'll let that dry for a minute. And the final bit here is the head. Just put some cement on this. And voila. Now you can turn the head a little bit. I generally leave it straight ahead, but there's our driver figure glued together. Now, while this guy's drying, I'm going to assemble these other four because we're going to do a few different things with each one on painting techniques and filling and sanding and that kind of thing. So I'll come back when I get those all done. Well, you can see I've got my figures glued together. Now, let's talk about just kind of polishing them up. The one seam I've found that shows when you paint them is the seam for the leg to the knee. The shoulder, surprisingly, does not show much because, you know, all the crinkly clothes. So I like to clean up the knees a little bit and then this line along the side. Now the line along the side, you can just kind of do it with an X-Acto knife, or I prefer these sanding sticks where I just hit them with a little bit of sanding stick. And certainly on the knee. Just pull it around here a little bit, and that knee seam will just kind of blend right in. That's the biggie. Everything else just doesn't show that much. So I like, this is a soft sanding stick. It's got kind of a foam in it. You can use fingernail files or a piece of sandpaper or whatever. That's really the joint that I find that shows. A bit along the side here. Piece under there still. So that's kind of my guy ready for paint. Now, sometimes if I'm getting real tricky, I will use a little sprue goo, and this is just Tamiya extra thin cement, where you take a bunch of piece of plastic sprue and drop them in the cement, and it makes this gooey mixture that is actually just liquid plastic. This one's getting a little thick, and sometimes I will put a little bit of that on the shoulder. Absolutely not necessary, but it just depends on how crazy you want to get with detailing out these guys. I'm not even going to do them. I just did a little tiny bit on this one. The rest of them I'm going to leave just out of the kit, glued together like we showed. So I'm going to clean up those knee joints on the rest of these guys, and then we're going to talk about painting them. Now, a couple of them I'm going to paint just with a brush for people that don't have an airbrush, to show you that you can do it. And then a couple of them I'm going to paint with an airbrush. So here's two of the driver figures. We're going to paint these with a brush. Now, one of them, you can see I sprayed a little bit of primer on it. Now, you don't have to just spray a ton of primer. Matter of fact, you don't even need primer. So just a very light coat, and that's the Tamiya Fine Primer. This one does not have any primer. And we've got 5 colors of paint. We've got Flesh, we've got XF18, which is medium blue. It'll be blue jeans. We've got a brown. This is NATO brown for the hair, black for a few details, and red for the shirt. So I'm going to grab a paintbrush here. I'm going to go with something a little wider for the shirt, and we'll start with the guy that doesn't have any primer. Now, one of the things I learned a long time ago about painting is, you know, when you're a kid, you just slap on coat after coat because you want the paint to cover everything. And now I realize that that's not the right way to do it. You just throw some paint on here, and it doesn't have to be perfect because, I mean, if you look at a picture of yourself with a red shirt on, it's it's not just a solid thick red color. It's got all kinds of variations in it. So we're going to just put on some paint. We're only going to do one coat. You don't need an airbrush. You don't need to be perfect around the joints. Now this is flat paint. I always paint my drivers with flat paint. In real life we're not shiny, and at the end I will actually spray some clear flat over the top of it. The back of course doesn't matter much if they're sitting in a chair, but I paint the whole thing anyway. Get his collar up here. Now this is probably a boring video, but I've been wanting to do this for a long time. A lot of people have asked me about it, so what the heck? We'll shoot the whole thing. Okay. There's our red shirt, and that looks pretty darn good. Now we're going to do the guy that has a little primer on him. There really shouldn't be much difference. Might be a little darker color because of the gray primer, but I don't think you're going to see a lot of difference. So whether you primer him or not is a completely individual decision. One thing nice about these Tamiya paints are acrylic. You can wash out your brush with water. All right. When we airbrush these guys, we're going to do blue and red also. Then we'll be able to see what the difference is. But I don't think for a driver figure that if that's the only thing you ever paint with an airbrush, it's not worth buying an airbrush because they brush paint up just fine. Alright, there's our two guys. We're going to let that dry. And then we'll come back and we'll take a quick look at the red, and then we'll paint the blue. So my guys are dry. The guy with the primer is just slightly darker. I like the effect. See, I didn't try to get it perfectly covered. I just brushed it on. Now I'm going to do the blue. And let's see here. We'll need a little stir stick. I just saved pieces of leftover sprue. Have them laying around the workbench for doing just this. And now we'll do the same thing with the jeans. Notice I'm not being real careful with the shoes. because they're going to be black, so they'll cover everything. You can see it just doesn't have to be super complicated. And I'm going to show you some tricks later on how to even make this look better. With brush paint, it's just fine. This is my guy with no primer. Don't really need to paint his butt because it's going to have double sticky tape put on it. There we go. Happy with that. I may have to do a second coat on this one, I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and paint this one. We'll come back when they're dry. Well, the two dudes are looking pretty good. You can see that paint's got a little bit of a shine to it, even though it's a flat paint. What I'm going to do now is, it's not completely dry, but I already stirred up the black paint, so I'm going to just paint his shoes while I'm in here. And that way, it's actually, as I'm filming this, it's late in the day. So once I get this done, I'll probably, which will only be seconds on video, but it'll be tomorrow in reality. So I can let the pants and the shoes and everything dry overnight. And then we'll finish him off tomorrow. You don't need a lot of really fancy equipment to do this. A couple paintbrushes, five different colors of Tamiya paint, and some panel line marker and some spray flat. We'll talk about that tomorrow. There we go. There's one of them. We'll do the other. You know, I actually really like doing this. It's quite relaxing to just paint these guys instead of the fury of wiring trucks and trying to make sound systems work. And I know you guys call me all the time and need a little help with that, and which is fine, and I love to do it, but it can be just the most crazy thing to make some electrical not work. And you can just paint on these guys all day long, and it's just very, very laid back. So yes, I like to do this once in a while. And the reason I'm painting 5 of them is then I'll just have them, so when I build a truck I can just throw a driver in and it'll be all ready to go. Because I do build a lot of trucks. And normally I find it much easier to get all my paints and everything out and do a couple of them instead of just one. Alright. We'll be back in a couple seconds on video and tomorrow in reality, and we'll get their heads and hair and hands and stuff painted, and then do some of the little details. Well, these guys are now dry. You can see that I haven't tried to do a fantastic paint job, because with clothing I found it's just fine to have it, you know, slightly brush stroked or discolored, whatever, because that's the reality of life. So now it's time to paint the face and hands, and I'm using Tamiya's XF15, which is a flat flesh color. And now I have to start being a little more careful because I don't want to get over the other colors. And same as the other paints, I'm just going to paint it on. It does not have to be perfect. If there's a little red underneath, all it does is darken this color a little bit, which gives it some variation, which is just fine. Even when I airbrush the figures, I still brush paint the flesh parts, just because I'm in a hurry usually, and this is a really quick way to paint. Light down here for you. There we go. There's the arms and hands, and then the face, and you don't have to be too worried about the hair because we're going to do that last. A lot of weird little crevices in here to get, and the ears. Hard part's the neck. You gotta get down in there a little bit. I might actually come back after this dries and hit it with just a little bit more just to cover up any, no, I don't know. It actually looks okay. Hands aren't quite as steady as they used to be, but hey, what can you say? I'm still upright in the morning. Okay, so there's our driver figure. I will do the other one, the flesh parts, and then we'll come back and do the hair. So my flesh is dry, looks pretty good. Now it's time for the hair. So I've got a small brush because it helps me with some of the little details. Then I'll use a slightly bigger brush for some of the area. And this is NATO brown. I don't know how I ever settled on NATO brown for hair, but it comes out pretty well. And same as everything else, it doesn't have to be super perfect, because if you've ever looked at your hair, you realize it's just not all super perfect color. Especially when you're an old dog like me. It's got a lot of gray in it, although I don't have that much hair anymore. Oh well. I'll relive my glory days by painting a lot of hair on this guy. So, one of the tricks I use, get most of this done here, get around his ears. When I'm doing the hair is down around the edges, I use a technique that's called dry brushing. Now, to do that, you just get a little paint and you rub the brush till it's kind of dry, and then you just hit it along these edges, and it highlights. The Tamiya mold has got a really nice kind of a little more hair here, a little more paint, kind of a nice molded in texture for the hair. But if you just slap a ton of paint on it, you can't see it. So you just want to use a tiny bit of paint. There we go. Same thing down here around the ear. So that kind of feathers in the edges. Okay. Sometimes I'll even just do a little tiny bit more paint there. And eyebrows. All right, that's good for that guy. Now I'll do the other one, and then we'll come back and I'll show you some of my techniques for finishing him off. So my hair's on, it's dry, looks pretty good. My next step is Tamiya panel line accent color, panel line marker. This is black. It's real thin, so when you put it on, it just runs. And you can see what it does. It runs into the cracks, and you don't have to be ungenerous with it. You just kind of slop it on, and it just, what it does is it highlights all the molding in the model. And yeah, I know this is really ugly looking, but just get this on here. Not too worried about his back. Put it right up on his, yeah, up on the hands, everywhere. Okay. And then I'll take a paper towel, and you can't really wipe because it'll actually take the paint right off. So you just got to dab to get rid of the excess. Probably could use a Q-tip in here, but now I'm going to do it on the hair and face. Same thing. We'll get a Q-tip, just kind of dab out around the eyes here. There you go. Stuff is just amazingly cool. Okay, and then we'll do his pants. Splatters everywhere, so you'll notice I'm using a piece of cardboard on my work mat because I want to try and keep my mat as nice as possible for my videos, but otherwise it would splatter all over the mat. Okay. Wow, looks good. What's cool about this is it accents all the heavy cracks and stuff. Okay, so that guy's done. You can see the difference between the guy that's done and the guy that's not done. So I'm going to finish this guy, and then we'll come back and take a look at him. So the next step I'm going to do here are the eyes. You can see I did this one. Basically, I just take a stick. This is a little plastic stick. You can use a toothpick or whatever. And I just put a tiny drop of paint on it. I'm using flat black here. And then just touch it. And that's it. Okay, our guys are painted. Now, one final step. So I'm going to go spray some Tamiya clear flat number TS80 on these to take any kind of shine off of them. So I'll go do that. I'm going to let them dry and we'll come back and take a look at these two guys. So here's these two guys all finished. I zoomed a little bit so you can see them better. The backs aren't too pretty, but that doesn't matter. They're going to be on in a seat. And these were all brush painted, so nothing fancy. I may hit them with one more coat of clear flat after they dry a little bit more, but basically they're done. And in a truck, they'll look fabulous. So the pointers with brush painting these guys are, number one, don't worry about slopping a lot of paint on. You can see the highlights in the pants look really nice. Same thing with the shirt. And you just don't take it any too serious. And then the panel line marker is really the trick. And you can do a lot of adjustment with panel line marker. You can make them darker or lighter or whatever, especially the hair and the skin. I have gray panel line marker too if I want to make some gray hair in there, but I didn't on these. Okay, so these two guys are done. Next thing I'm going to do is I've got three more, if you remember correctly. Three more. I'm going to airbrush these babies, and then we'll compare them at the very end. But I think you'll find that it doesn't make a lot of difference whether you airbrush them or brush paint them. So I took these guys and I just wrapped a little blue tape around them. You'll notice that it is not anywhere near being a masking line. It's more just to keep the overspray off the top of the legs. And generally I don't even hardly do this. So now I'm going to airbrush the shirts. Then after that dries, I will throw a piece of tape around them and airbrush the pants. So I will go airbrush these and bring them back. I don't even know what color I'm going to use. I'm just going to spray some paint on them. We'll see what they look like. So here's these guys after airbrushing. I chose a color called Buff, mainly because I just had some already thinned in my paint drawer. It's actually a color you would use on like a modern Abrams tank or something, but it makes a really great looking shirt. So now what I'm going to do is wrap a piece of tape around his belly, and actually let me grab some tape and we'll do one of these. Okay, grab some Tamiya tape. This is 10 millimeter. And same thing, my intention here is not a solid masking line. It's more of a prevent overspray from getting up onto the shirt type of thing. And of course the back doesn't really matter. So something like that. And that way when I spray the blue, it doesn't whip up onto his body. And so I will go airbrush the blue. Well, here's these guys out of the airbrush booth. What can I say? Pretty straightforward. They look just fine. Now I'm going to do the same thing I did with the other ones. I'm going to brush paint the shoes. I'm going to brush paint the flesh. I'm going to brush paint the hair. And when I'm done with that, I'll show them to you, and then we'll do the same treatment with the Tamiya panel line marker. Let's see, let's get one of these guys. Here's one of the finished brush painted guys, so you can kind of see a comparison. Obviously different colors, different color jeans, different color shirt. We'll just see how that looks when we get it all done. So here's my 3 airbrushed figures, all finished. This one I used the Tamiya black panel line marker and washed it pretty heavily, so I gave his shirt basically a darker color. This one I used Tamiya's gray panel line marker, which is making him lighter, And this one I did not use any panel line marker, so you can see the difference in those three. And then of course we've got our brush painted guys here that are red, and we've got the one that's red with no primer and the one that's red with a little bit of gray primer. And you can see that you can paint these things. Airbrushing, brush painting really doesn't make any difference. They look fantastic no matter how you paint them. You'll notice I got, you know, a little bit of overbrush here from some flesh, but I'm not even going to bother to fix it, because first off, you know, a truck driver, I figure their jeans are going to get all stained and messed up anyway, and second off, you just can't see it that good from outside the truck. So there's a bunch of different driver figures. Now, what do we do with our driver figure once we got him done? Let's talk about that. So I've got a globe liner here that I've been working on, and this is set up pretty typical for the way I do globe liners. I make a bulkhead behind the seat so I can hide all the electronics behind the bulkhead, and I actually have a video on that. And then I usually build a little engine box out of some sheet plastic because the motor is exposed. So there's my globe liner, and now I want to put my figure in here, and I've decided I like the red guy for this. So I'm just going to take a couple pieces of Tamiya's double sticky tape, and I know I showed cutting that with scissors. I normally don't cut it with scissors. I cut it with an X-Acto knife. We'll put a piece across his butt. I'm going to cut the back piece with the X-Acto knife. We'll put a piece across his back here, like that. And we'll stick him down. I suppose you could glue him with like E6000 or something, but I found that this double sticky tape works just fine. Okay, so there's our guy mounted in the truck. Now I usually add a couple other things. I got some brown paper here, so I'll cut a square out of the brown paper. A little bit smaller, and I'll use a little piece of double sticky tape. We'll cut a couple pieces here. So we're going to put a piece of double sticky tape on the brown paper, stick it on the console. Then we're going to take our cheeseburger, and the cheeseburger comes from Hobby Lobby's dollhouse section. And we're going to throw the cheeseburger on the brown paper. And then we've got a little soda can, another little piece of double sticky tape. Put that on the bottom of the soda can. Stick that there on the console. And finally, we've got a little dog, also from Hobby Lobby's dollhouse section. And we'll stick the little dog on the passenger seat with a little double sticky tape. Just like that. Boom. There we go. Driver figure all painted, kind of weathered up a little bit. Looks really good. Got the interior of the truck looking great. Now you look through the windows on this truck, and there's a lot going on with the Coke and the cheeseburger and the dog and my driver figure that's painted pretty well. Look, I know I'm not the world's most fantastic figure painter. You can watch YouTube videos of people painting figures. It's just amazing. But when you're building a figure for a truck, it doesn't have to be super fantastic. It just has to look halfway decent. And so when you look in through the windows, you see this guy. Obviously, a truck driving around looks kind of dumb with no figure at all in there. So there you go. Tamiya's driver figures, little how-to on painting and putting them together. I hope you found this useful. Give this video a thumbs up if you did. I appreciate that. It helps with the YouTube rankings. And please subscribe for more truck videos. So there you go. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.